I don't imagine that anytime in the immediate future that we're just orchestrating agents around the organization that are doing, crucial work without any human in the loop.
One of the biggest lies or the biggest misconceptions that prevails in AI today.
And I think the hallucinations are important. We still need to keep humans in the loop. We still need to fact check the things that it comes back with. But if you're so fixated on that it's stopping you from using AI, you're thinking about using it the wrong way.
What do you think are the skills that become exponentially more valuable for your employees to have?
I think it's creativity.
Just a very, very different world that could exist in 5-10 years.
We want to be as thoughtful as possible about the things that we're doing with AI.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Chief AI Officer. Today, I'm really excited to bring you Michael Domanic, who is the head of AI at UserTesting. Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Ben. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into lots of topics related to AI and what you're doing at UserTesting. Can you give our listeners just a quick background on yourself and what UserTesting does for context?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you said it. I'm the head of AI at UserTesting. So that means I drive our AI transformation mission here that has a pretty broad, sweeping impact on most of the things that we do in the organization. And that's really what we're focused on. So yeah, UserTesting is a platform that other companies use to get feedback. A lot of times that's going to be on the things that they're designing, but really it's a feedback engine, right? So anything that your organization needs to get feedback on, you can leverage our platform to, set up surveys, set up usability tests, and then tap into the relevant cohort of individuals that you need to get that feedback from, because we're also a panel of millions of people around the world.
I can imagine there's thousands of potential use cases for AI in delivering that product. I'm sure we'll get into plenty of them. Before we do that, I think in this journey that we're all on together, trying to figure out how to best use it, failure is often like a great place to learn from. And so I want to just ask at the outset, is there like a failure along the way, not necessarily at UserTesting, but that changed how you think about AI and just transformation generally within large companies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think where my mind goes actually is pretty far back, about 10 years ago. I think many people might not recognize that we're in the second big hype cycle of AI, especially AI chatbots in the last 10 years. So I'll give you a brief history lesson here, for your listeners. So in 2015, Facebook acquired a company called Wit.ai. Wit.ai was a natural language processing engine, and then they integrated that into their Messenger product. In 2016, they told brands, build these AI-driven, bespoke brand experiences, talk to your customers, convert your customers to product inside of Facebook Messenger. The backdrop to all of that was Alexa was proliferating in homes across America. You had Google Assistant. There was the Apple Home products. Slack was developing bots. So like conversational interface was a big thing that was happening. I feel like 2016 to 2019, 2020. And I was pretty deeply involved in a lot of that. I was designing a lot of the experiences that brands were launching on those platforms. And, we had I think we had high expectations of the possibilities there. And what we found is most of those experiences just kind of fell flat on their faces. And the reason for that is they just did not deliver against the expectations that users had of them. The expectations that users had were built up for decades in media. It was movies like Her, which was, a very kind of commonly talked about movie in that time. Go back to 2001, A Space Odyssey. In the 80s, you had Knight Rider, right? A guy was talking to his onboard car computer. So like people's frame of reference for AI, conversational AI was already a little bit more advanced than what the technology was capable of delivering. So I think really having an in-tune understanding of how important user expectations were helped me reframe my thinking around this new hype cycle of AI. So now you fast forward to November of 2022, GPT 3.5 gets launched onto the world, and all those expectations change around new technology.
I love that context. You're giving me slight PTSD because I used to be VP of marketing at a company that worked in conversational commerce and was a very close beta partner when they launched Facebook Messenger. So I completely know what you mean about some of those experiencing some of those experiences not meeting consumer expectations or having to become much more structured and kind of sentiment based and just really or intent based and not at all like the natural flow of conversation that many people expect it to be.
Yeah.
Obviously today it's almost like going completely in the opposite direction, where it's very capable of hallucinating an answer to something that it doesn't have and like responding to it in a very confident way.
Yeah.
Where do you see that line, trying to draw the line between those two hype cycles, right? We are in another one. What do you think people get wrong about the current hype cycle?
I'm not sure. I mean, like the way that I always frame this somewhat facetiously is that, going back to trying to build on NLP, was that the technology wasn't ready to deliver against the expectations of users. And now, the technology wasn't ready for the moment. Now the moment's not ready for the technology, right? Like now we're trying to play catch up to like all of the possibilities that this thing could be. And you layer in hallucinations and you layer in the possibility of agents and trying to be really thoughtful about, for an enterprise like UserTesting and many other enterprises, trying to be really thoughtful about the implications of layering these capabilities into your organization when you're trying to connect data, and just maintaining responsibility and an obligation to responsibility to your customers, to your employees, to your stakeholders. Like that's where this is really different. So to put that more succinctly, the possibilities are just so much larger now. And so are all of the risks and all of the things that you need to think about.
And as you navigate that space of possibility at UserTesting, how do you think about prioritizing use cases and what you're actually delivering in product or to your customers?
Yeah. So, I mean, most of my focus, it's less on product and more on internal transformation. Although I do have a close partnership with product and we talk about the things that we should be doing with generative AI in our product. And we have a pretty robust strategy there as well. But when it comes to use cases inside of the organization, again, like it's what's challenging about this. It's so abstract and it's like there's so many things that you could do. But we try to be really focused on putting the most amount of effort into use cases that will have a big difference on the things that matter most to our organization. We are a SaaS company, right? So that means that we want to expand revenue growth, we want to retain customers, and we want to increase our product velocity. There are limitless other use cases inside of the organization, but I try to tether our most meaningful, resource-driven efforts into one of those three different buckets.
And as you do that, a lot of people that come on this show typically mention the huge value of just ML in bringing a bunch of that value in terms of like churn analysis, like prediction, all of, some of the things that might touch on those buckets that you just outlined. Do you see that as being where a lot of the value is generated right now, or is it a mix between generative and more traditional ML?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a company, we've been pretty actively engaged with machine learning for years. I mean, most of that has been in our product. So, we've been thinking a lot about how machine learning integrates into our product to enhance the value that our customers get out of it. And we've been deploying features since 2019. So yeah, again, like when it comes to the ML conversation, most of that has happened with a focus on our products. With generative AI, I think it's still relevant, but I think that the generative AI feels more transformational, and it also feels more democratized. So like that's what we're trying to do as an organization, is to give everyone the ability to, have these advanced capabilities and have this, increased potential that generative AI brings. So it's machine learning is still there in the background. We're still thinking about it all the time, but it's more around generative AI. It's more around like integrating an LLM into workflows and processes, create efficiencies, add rigor. Those sorts of things are important to us.
Yeah, I think democratization and transformation are two things that are what feels so revolutionary about this technology, right? That you can put it in the hands of anyone, and the business user at the last mile is going to find some way that no one in like a top-down way would have ever predicted to find some efficiency or to find some transformative gain, which is what makes this so interesting and what I'm sure makes your job probably pretty difficult too in terms of figuring out how to prioritize what you scale. I think it's also hard because of what you mentioned at the outset, right? Which is the hype. And like, what do you think is one of the biggest lies or the biggest misconceptions that prevails in AI today, or that the industry kind of keeps pushing that makes your job more difficult?
That's a good question. You mentioned hallucinations earlier. Like, I don't think that this is a lie, but I think maybe there's an over focus on the hallucination piece. So for starters, like the hallucinations are definitely getting a lot better, right? If you look at like the GPT-5 models compared to the 3.5 model, that there's a measurable improvement there. But when I talk to people at other companies that tell me that they're hesitant to deploy a robust strategy around generative AI because of this hallucination thing, it tells me that they're maybe not thinking about it the right way. Hallucinations are more of a factor for the more basic use cases of AI. So taking this back to, there's three ways that an enterprise transforms around generative AI. You use it as an intern, you use it as an assistant, and most importantly, you use it as a thought partner. So when you're using it as an assistant, you're asking it to summarize things for you. Or sorry, intern. So when you're using it as an intern, you're asking it to summarize things for you. When you're using it as an assistant, you're asking it to write emails or blog posts or LinkedIn posts. Those are very valuable ways to use generative AI. And I think those use cases have the highest exposure to hallucination risk, albeit like considerably lower than it was in the past. But by far the most interesting way, most transformative way for people working in companies to use AI is to use it as a thought partner. And I think that this is where hallucination has much less of a concern, right? Because then you're asking it to be a strategic partner. You're saying to AI that here's a problem that I'm focused on in my role in my organization. Here's a solution that I'm thinking of. Help me poke holes in the solution. You're a time traveler, come back from the future, tell me what went right or wrong about that solution. And, you're not really concerned at that point as much around it giving you confidently wrong data, confidently wrong metrics. You're really just more focused on using it as a strategic thought partner. And that's where I think is the most transformative use cases of AI. So I think like more succinctly to answer your question, I think the hallucinations are important. We still need to keep humans in the loop. We still need to fact check the things that it comes back with. But if you're so fixated on that it's stopping you from using AI, you're thinking about using it the wrong way.
Yeah, I love that distinction. And I think it says a lot about how you're approaching it too, right? That it's still very much the human is at the center of that. And it's about enabling and augmenting that human. That's very different than people that are approaching this from, an operational efficiency standpoint in an organization that are trying to build agentic solutions, right? That are almost like removing humans or maybe keeping humans in a tiny part of that loop. Very, very different mindset. How do you balance those two things? Do you feel a push like from leadership sometimes of like trying to implement more agentic solutions and you're kind of holding the line for this like augmentation mindset?
So it is something that we're focused on at UserTesting. We are really interested in the possibilities of agentic solutions connected to workflows. You want to increase efficiencies and augmentation around the business. All of that stuff, at least from our point of view, all of that stuff today still has human in the loop. Like I can't imagine completely automating really large, really important processes. I just don't see that happening for us, at least right now. But what can happen for us is you create an agent that helps you recognize things that maybe you don't, recognize signals in large swaths of data that are indicating specific triggers around, maybe things your customers are doing. I think the thing that we talk about a lot, the example that we give a lot in our organization is, we create an agent to recognize churn signals in our customers. And, we're just getting those signals much, much earlier because an agent is monitoring all of the data. But then there's still a human in the loop. Like we're still verifying that those triggers are correct. Those signals are correct. We're the ones making the decisions about what actions to take with that customer. So yeah, I don't imagine that anytime in the immediate future that we're just orchestrating agents around the organization that are doing, crucial work without any human in the loop.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to go about it to mitigate some of the limitations that we mentioned earlier. As you kind of oversee this transformation within user testing, how do you navigate all the different stakeholders, and how do you, as you roll out different initiatives, like how do you identify the people that might kill an initiative or be a major blocker, and how do you deal with that? Because I know that that's something a lot of people on this show struggle with.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm not concerned with anyone killing initiatives. There's definitely hesitation in some of the maybe more advanced things that we want to do. We should welcome that hesitation, I think, because at the end of the day, we want to be as thoughtful as possible about the things that we're doing with AI. This is really just fidelity to responsibility, right? So, I think we have a lot of conversations with legal and security around, like, especially when it comes to agentic stuff, right? Like, here are the things that we want to do. We want to connect all of this data. But before we do any of that, let's think through all of the implications. Let's make sure that we're doing this responsibly. Let's err on the side of caution. Sure, the possibilities of doing this stuff will, present transformational value to our organization. But before we get there, let's make sure that we're doing it the right way. So look, I think that when it comes to managing stakeholders, I think you need to build a partnership. You need to make sure that everyone understands why you're doing the thing that you're doing, what is the potential value of the thing, and have open conversations. Welcome that hesitation, right? Because that hesitation exists for a reason. People around your organization, smart people, are going to give you thoughtful input around, here's where we should be slowing down. Here's where we should be more careful.
Yeah, I've heard similar ideas from other guests on this show in terms of even just like bringing in the detractors early, or just the people that are most reluctant probably are the ones that have thought through the implications of certain things the most. And so bringing them on early is the best way to ensure success.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think about this, like most of the answer I gave you was really looking at leadership stakeholders, right? Like people that are helping us move the mission forward and be thoughtful about where we should be slowing down. I think that this is at the end user level too, like especially at the individual contributor level. User testing has made tremendous progress and momentum around adoption of AI, right? Most of our organization is using AI every single day. The vast majority of us are using it, several times a week. There are still a cohort of individuals that I would maybe refer to as conscientious objectors. There are people who are saying, I'm not on board with this, right? And there are a lot of legitimate reasons to not be on board with this. Those are the people who I listen to the most. I don't want to just be like plunging headlong into the future of AI. Like, I want thoughtful people to tell me why they're thinking about the hesitations that they have. And I don't think it's my role to try to convince them. My role is really to listen. And if there are ways to help them, turn that corner, sure, like we'll do that together. I do think that's important. Really what I would like is for everyone to have a seat at the table of what drives the future of AI, both in our organizations and in society at large. So I think those conscientious objectors and the hesitators play a really important role in helping us have that conversation.
As you listen to those conscientious objectors, what themes surface the most in terms of the objections?
I think it's part personal and part societal. So personal is, you're asking me to train my hangman, right? Like, you're asking me to train the thing that's going to replace me. So that's the personal side. And I don't think that's the case, right? I don't think that, like, user testing is not trying to create redundancies in people around the organization. We're just trying to do more with these advanced tools. The other side to that is the societal stuff. So it's the environmental impact. It's just like the general way that society is like plunging into this future. It feels fast for a lot of people. Frankly, it does for me as well. So I think like those are the main themes that we see when people are saying like, I'm not going to participate with this. I'm not on board. There's also like maybe a third group here, which is people that just don't want to learn a new thing. I think that's a much smaller group, but I think that's part of this as well. So for those individuals, I think there's the possibility, to help guide them through a journey. It's just that their journey is going to look different from, early adopters.
Yeah. The displacement argument is something that is, everywhere. And it's interesting too. I think that it's hard for people, right? Like, we have assigned purpose to our work for so long, and to have this experience where no matter the limitations, like the experience of it is you're watching a machine do work that you felt used to be very reserved to humans and creative endeavors. And I just think there's something about that even feels strange to the people that are plunging into this head first. Like there are moments when I'm interacting with AI where yeah,
Yeah,
you can have an experience where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it just generated that. And then another experience where you spend 3 hours smashing your head against the wall because it like can't figure out this one very basic thing.
very true.
And that like jagged frontier of intelligence is something that is, I think we're all exploring together, which is part of what makes this so interesting.
I think that the responsibility piece is an important component to this. So I think a lot of companies are still struggling with the question of, do we need a formal AI transformation program in our organization, right? Like
Hmm.
that's not a step a lot of companies have made. And I would say yes. And I think there's two reasons to do it. The first is the obvious potential around augmenting work, around transforming work, creating greater efficiencies. Like that should be pretty obvious to us at this point. I think the second reason you do this is responsibility. And I think that responsibility has two branches to it. The first branch is making sure that when your employees are using AI, that they're doing it responsibly, managing data responsibly, like not putting the wrong data into models, making sure that models are not training on your data. But the second branch, the responsibility, is kind of the thing that we were talking about, which is our responsibility that we have to our employees, to our workforce. I used to say this with a little bit of hesitation, but I feel confident that like this is going to be one of the most transformational events that we're all going to go through in our lives, maybe in human history. And given that level of impact, I think it is the responsibility of employers to help guide their employees through this transformation. So I think like that's the real reason, or those are the real reasons that a company needs an enterprise level transformation program. And the responsibility piece is something that I feel that, right? I feel it every day.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think there's also the element of not having it in place risks a bunch of shadow AI going on at your company, like a bunch of data leakage. Like it's probably going to happen anyway. And so having some sort of governance framework, or at least just someone trying to figure out how to manage that transformation, will make a difference. I'm curious, a lot of times sometimes when I speak to people on this show, they oversee AI in both product and kind of operations, which it sounds like in user testing, you're very much like focusing on operations and product is managed in a different way. When they make that split, they often say like, we use vendors a lot for operational stuff, and anything that's core to product, we build in-house. Do you rely on vendors a lot when it comes to like operations? Are there certain things that you're also building in-house?
Yeah, I would say like lightweight building for now.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like we try to be thoughtful about the resources that we use on the operational side. But look, I mean, we started our enterprise transformation journey with ChatGPT Enterprise, right? Like everyone in the company has access to it. Now, when it comes to building, a lot of that just happens with custom GPTs. Like we built a pretty strong culture around custom GPTs. We're a company of almost 800 people. We have over 700 GPTs built across the company. So like it's pretty simple building, right? Like I'm like kind of stretching the word building a little bit when we're talking about
Yeah.
custom GPTs, but there are like some data integrations into those. Like we use the actions feature to connect into some of our data to enhance the training of the GPTs. So all of that stuff happens in-house, right? Like that gets democratized across the company. Everyone has the ability to do that stuff. If you're going to do the more technical integrations, you need to bring me in, you need to bring IT partners in, but a
Mm.
simple GPT could be built by anybody. And yeah, so the rest of it is driven by vendors, right? We use vendors for pretty much everything else, except for on the product side. On the product side, we're building all of that stuff in house.
I have two follow-up questions to that. One, you mentioned the culture of creating custom GPTs. I think that's a very powerful thing, no matter how it manifests. But how do you build a culture that promotes that kind of activity? And then on the vendor side, there's so much hype in the marketplace that seems like there's 10,000 solutions for every
Yeah.
vertical thing. How do you separate the signal from the noise?
All right. So two kind of big things to unpack there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the culture around GPTs really started early in our journey. We brought ChatGPT Enterprise into our organization about a year and a half ago. At that time, we were really interested in the possibilities of custom GPTs. So, like custom GPTs got launched in November of 2023, and to me, like that was like an aha moment. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, like the first wave of AI hype was trying to build somewhat of the same thing, right? On top of like mostly incapable technology. But when I saw Sam Altman get up on Dev Day in November 2023 and introduce custom GPTs, like that was like, oh my God, like that's the thing that we needed in that first hype cycle to really enhance the experiences that we were creating. So look, we were just really interested in it very early on as an organization. We did a couple hackathons in the company where we brought thoughtful people together to think about like, hey, what would a custom GPT look like, transforming these important workflows in your teams. That created a lot of virality, a lot of interest. And I think a lot of that transformation and culture was also driven by being really intentional around building custom GPTs that had broad application across the business. So an example of that was, in Q1 of every year, every company is going through some kind of goal setting exercise, OKRs, V2 moms, KPIs. So we do OKRs here at UserTesting, and we created a GPT that helped the entire organization create their OKRs. So that showed people the possibility that, like, okay, like here's something that's like helping me do a thing that I probably didn't really want to spend a ton of time doing. And I'm really probably not that good at to begin with. But this thing actually helped me do a really good job of it. And that got a lot of people interested in becoming builders and building things that had broader application for their team. So there was just a lot of kind of virality around that. I forget the second part of your question.
Yeah, they were two big questions. So I appreciate taking the time to answer that one first. The other one was just around separating signal from noise in the marketplace when you're choosing between vendors, because there's so many solutions out there. So as you make decisions about, okay, we're going to go after these use cases, here's like the vendor shortlist, whatever it might be, however you make that decision. Yeah, how do you unpack that decision and then choose between all of them when what feels like it's happening a lot in the market right now are these like wow demo moments that just like immediately fall apart when you actually try to implement the thing at scale. And so, yeah, what's your process for trying to vet the right vendors?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we went through in the early part of this year was people coming to me saying, here's an AI solution that's being pitched to our team. Is this interesting to us, right? And a lot of that was just wrappers around an LLM, right? It's a little bit of a pejorative term, but there is an accuracy to that. Like you go to any AI conference and 90% of the booths there are just LLM wrappers, right? So a lot of that stuff, we were like saying, no, we don't need to spend $40,000 on that. We're going to spend 20 minutes building a GPT that does the same thing. So I think that's the first thing on the more simplified use cases. And really what that is answering an important question is, can we do this already, right? Do we have a tool that does this thing already? Now, the second part of that is, tools that don't already, solutions that we don't already have a tool for. And a lot of that for us is looking at more agentic solutions like enterprise AI orchestration. And for us, there's a lot of players that we're looking at. There are a lot of people that we've talked to. The most important consideration is security, right? I think that we need to make sure that any solution that we bring in is going to be enterprise grade, is going to meet our very high standard for security. And then from there, it's kind of like cascading to use cases. It's cascading to usability of the product. Any orchestration tool that we bring into user testing, we want, it has to be like a low code, no code tool that can be broadly used around the organization. So I think like those are kind of like the key considerations. Like at the end of the day, like I think you can like kind of recognize a theme in a lot of things I'm talking about, which is like we're very aware, very focused on security, very focused on great governance, being responsible, and we're gonna place a pretty strong emphasis to any vendor that can put us in that environment.
Yeah, and to your point, it sets you up for then democratizing it and giving the end users access, right? Having that solid foundation, great security and governance, and then integration with your systems obviously has a lot of overlap in terms of the remit of like a chief technology officer or a chief data officer. How do you navigate the relationship with those counterparts? Do you have those counterparts at UserTesting? And then what is that relationship like? Who do who manages what in an age where it feels like it's starting to blur a lot?
Well, yes. I mean, we do have those roles here at UserTesting, and we all see this as a partnership, right? Like we're all trying to walk in tandem towards the thing that we want, the place that we want to get to, and we all come in with different levels of expertise, right? So, like our CTO, our head of IT, like these are close partnerships that we have, and they're gonna know a lot more about the molecular level of the technology impact. But I'm gonna come at this with more from the creative lens, right? Like I'm gonna think about this of like, where do we use this to augment workflows around the organization? Where do we use this to drive meaningful impact around the organization? So like, it's a partnership. I don't think that, companies that just think about this as either just a technology solution or just a business solution, as you like looking at this like through blinders, right? Like it's like too siloed. You need to think about all of the implications here. And I think that's like a lot of companies, I think, made the mistake of thinking about generative AI as just a technology solution. You go back to an MIT study from a couple of weeks ago where they're saying like 95% of AI initiatives have failed to produce ROI. I think that there's some flaws in the way that the data was analyzed or the way the research was conducted, but I do think it's directionally correct. And I think the reason for that is out of the gates, a lot of organizations were like, oh, AI, technology, like this is the technology solution. Let's figure out the technological impacts to all of this. And what they failed to think about was all of the abstract, creative side of generative AI. This is technology that looks very different from any other technology that we've ever tried to deploy in our organizations.
Yeah, spoke to someone recently that said something that really stuck with me, which was that like making this shift towards a very ROI focused short-term mindset of like, how do we decrease costs across all of the existing operations that we have as a company, being that narrow mindset to have, and the broader mindset and the longer time horizon mindset being something more about what work could you never possibly have done before? Like what couldn't you afford to do? What was just like simply not possible? And how has that landscape shifted? And I just feel like when you adopt that mindset, and to your point, when you put that mindset into everyone in your company and build a culture around that, that's what I think some of the best organizations are doing today.
Totally
and as
agree.
they do that, what do you think are the skills that become exponentially more valuable for your employees to have as this technology progresses?
I think it's creativity. At the end of the day, we're all trying to think creatively about the way that we're going to work differently, a completely different mindset of like the way that you approach your work. All of that stuff is warranted. So the more creative you are with thinking about all of these possibilities and integrating those possibilities in the way that you work, I think that is the most important skill.
Yeah, so I agree. Creativity is one of the things that many other people on this show have highlighted as one of the key things to think about in hiring and just generally how to be great with these new tools. Are there any red flags like for people? Like, are there potential skills or mindsets that you look for and think, okay, maybe that's like that person is not going to be as good? Like you mentioned some of the conscientious objectors. Would that be something that factors into this going forward when you think about building the right team?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have a great answer to it. I think the conscientious objectors, going back to this, is I actually think I want to elevate them. I'm again like I think that they play an important role in helping us figure out the right way to responsibly adopt AI across our organizations and across society at large. So I would definitely not want to say like, oh, you're a conscientious objector to AI. Like you don't have a spot on the team, right? I don't know. Like it's a great question, Ben. Like I don't know if there's any specific skill that makes it really problematic to bring that person into an environment where we're transforming around AI. Like certainly like if you're a laggard, like maybe like if you're just saying like I'm too lazy to try to learn this new thing, maybe that's a red flag. Yeah, like yeah, maybe, but I would ask individuals like to explain how they're using AI. If they say that they're not, and they don't have like a great reason for it, maybe that's a red flag.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like again, like I think I'm probably more focused on trying to find people who are really thoughtful and really creative around AI use. I love hearing interesting use cases that people are talking about and bringing AI into their work. Like I love learning about new stuff around that. So yeah, I mean, anyone who has like really interesting novel ways that they're adopting the technology, I mean, that always piques my interest.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that? Because I think that's one thing that everyone in different industries and companies always just have some nuggets here and there that are always so different.
I think I'm really interested in like the different things that people are using with like agentic capabilities. We're all nibbling around the edges of this right now, right? Like no one has all this figured out. So I'm interested in the people who are experimenting. I'm interested in the people who like are saying like, hey, here's some like agentic solution that I tried to deploy. We're not doing this in like a robust way yet at UserTesting again, because we're thinking through like all of the security implications. But I'm trying to do this as much as possible in my own personal life. So I use ChatGPT agents to enhance like different things or connect to different things in my personal life. And I would say that one of the hardest parts of my job is, and I think probably most people you interview would say the same thing, is just wrapping my arms around all of the changes to AI, like all the things that are happening every single day. So I have an agent that's trained to identify the most relevant things that have happened over the last 24 hours. It puts that into a succinct format for Notebook LM. Then it generates the audio overview. Then it gets sent to my email. And then I have like a 15-minute recap of what happened over the last 24 hours that I can listen to somewhere in the margins of my day. Like I think like that's the kind of like stuff that's interesting to be playing around with right now. And anyone doing that kind of stuff is always going to pique my interest.
Yeah, I love that example. It's such a great one for the age that we live in today and like the ability to personalize your own media, like using these like incredible like language translation tools. And I think, also speaks to just a very, very different world that could exist in 5-10 years where like we're no longer going to, obviously the sources of information still have to be producing that information, but like the ways in which we consume it are going to be radically different. And whether it's a set of agents interacting with another company's set of agents to like then bring you the personalized thing, I think the protocols that will be built around that are going to start to create a very different internet experience. And I think it's something that we're all kind of co-creating. So it's a very exciting time to be wrapping your arms around the technology, as you so well put it. Michael, that's all we have time for today. But I really, really enjoyed this conversation. If people want to follow your work and learn more about user testing, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, come to our website. We've got a very robust blog where we talk about AI. We have our own podcast as well. About on a monthly basis, I will interview people, usually like in the design or UX world, that are doing interesting things with AI. The rest of those episodes are usually a little bit more focused on, like the executional layer of like UX and design. If you're following me, follow me on LinkedIn. Like I don't have like a website or a blog that I'm trying to promote. Like just, I post stuff on LinkedIn every once in a while, try to engage in the conversation that's happening there.
Yeah, well, you heard it. That was Michael Domanic, who's head of AI at UserTesting. Michael, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. It was a great conversation.